I've been learning that my inner child is kind of the preferred setting for parenthood. It's what your instinct is. Sometimes you don't even think about it, you just do it because it's just part of the original programming that you had. So sometimes I think sayings like lost cause, bad egg, things like that, especially if the parent says it, reflects on how they're trying to push the responsibility of the actions on the individual. And yes, we have to take individual responsibility for choices that we make, regardless of our childhood. But I think this plays a big part in millennial motherhood because, well, for the fact, most millennials are not having kids. I keep reading all these articles and seeing all these videos and all of the census numbers come out on things, and I'm baffled with some of the results that I see. And I don't know if it's just because my brain works differently than other people, or if because people are just not interested in the same topics that I'm interested in. So communicating with people sometimes is really hard, especially after so many stressful and life-changing life events in a row. And you have to remember that your kids went through that too. And your kids went through it with less understanding of why it was happening than you did. So as stressful as situations are for us, the parents, the adults, it's even sometimes more stressful for children, preteen, teenagers, because they're starting to understand life has consequences. Life gives you scars. Some scars we can see and some scars we can't. And sometimes I do have that smallest part of me that feels bad that I am calling my mother a monster. That she could be dealing with stuff I can't see, no problem. And then I have to remember that every action she did was a choice. Just like my actions are choices. And as a child, I was told so much how to act. I was never taught how to act. Does that make sense? I wasn't taught to think and solve it on my own because from a young age, I was told that my brain was tested differently and that my brain worked differently than other people. I was just told this my entire life. I was basically told everything that I could not do because of the way my brain worked. I don't know if my mother did it out of trying to get me to understand or using it as a mentally and emotional degrading, grind you into the dirt thing. Because I could never tell with my mother. And that's one thing I want to make sure I am very clear with my kids. I want to be so clear with my kids they don't have to try to guess what I'm trying to say or do to them. And the more I go through therapy and medicating properly and like healing and moving on from life and my past, is that I don't know basic skills. I have to accept this. And it almost feels like, looking back on my childhood now as an adult, it almost feels like I was raised this way because my mother was lazy, was sick of school herself, and she just did not want to have to be in the school system again. Because even when we were homeschooling, we never had a schedule. We never had any type of structure at all. We would literally get things told to us one time, and if we did not remember it, we could be shoved in a corner and yelled at. Like, not just yelled at, but like screamed. I mean, she would go hoarse and her whole body would be sore and in pain afterwards. Do you know how much yelling you have to do to make your entire body sore afterwards? Something that I find ironic is that she told us how much she worked for it to be that we couldn't be spanked by our father because he was just a big, horrible, evil monster. That was what she painted him. And we were told everything that ever happened in their divorce, in life, everything was through her first. And I remember when she told us we weren't allowed to call on the phone anymore. Like, we were no longer allowed to use the telephone. And this was like early 2000s. So cell phones, especially for poor people, were not a thing. We had one phone. It was her phone, her cell phone. And it was her phone. We were not allowed to touch it. My children are not allowed to touch my phone to get into things, but they know the password on my phone in case of emergencies. And now phones nowadays have an emergency button so you can immediately call. And I make sure my kids know how to work my phone. Because my mother went from, oh, here's your phone at home, and 911, this, that, and another. And then as soon as she had realized that I wasn't fully buying her story of dad as a monster, she started really almost hating me. And I wonder if part of it is because every time I see a relative from my father's side of the family, the first thing they tell me is, "Oh my God, you look like Steve." So I don't know if my mother just hated me because I made her a mother, or if I looked like my father, or if I just did not believe anything she said most of the time. I learned from a young age that my mother never stopped talking, and that most of the stuff out of her mouth would never come true, would never happen, or it's made up. She's lying. I literally don't know how to explain. If I could buy stock in my mother's word, it would be worth absolutely nothing. Let's put it this way. I think mainstream media has more trust from me than what my mother would say. And that's probably something I need to talk about in therapy. But I think there is something to your inner childhood is your kind of grown-up model. This podcast kind of jumps around all over the place. I really have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna give it my damnedest and see what happens.